Welcome to Forthright Gaming Podcast, making gaming content for gamers by gamers. I'm your host, Ian, and today with me, like always, is David, and we're going to talk about the Alien franchise and its turbulent video game history. There are literally 47 titles for this franchise, and that doesn't include Predator. That is just straight up Alien games and Alien versus Predator games that feature Alien from the movie franchise. It's kind of weird because the movie franchise has two really successful movies, and then the rest are kind of just crap and forgotten about. And everything else that they've made, anything related to Alien, even Alien versus Predator, have just been kind of mediocre movies and whatnot. So it's whether this franchise, whose only two outstanding things are from 1979 and 1986, has spawned 47 different games, multiple comics, and other spin-off stuff too. I'm sure that I didn't find in my research.
A lot of people like Prometheus.
Prometheus is garbage. I can't believe that. Cartographers who get lost on a cave.
Yeah, he's got a 3D scanner, which actually I think we'll get into this later, but I do like how some of the cool parts of those terrible films does kind of come into play into some of the gaming franchise, which we'll get into later.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's like video games have definitely taken the best parts of the franchise and tried to bring those things into it. They've just failed either on their execution or their story tie-in or something like that, or Alien Colonial Marines, the graphics and AI was really bad. But this all started back on Atari. 1981 was the first Alien game that came out, or 1980 or 81. But they've have games that are across Atari, NES, SNES, Game Boy, MSX, Amiga, Genesis, arcades, PCs. They've touched about every platform possible. There's an Alien game on there, but it's been kind of like this cursed franchise where it's like Batman used to be, where every Batman game sucked. Almost every Alien game that was for a proprietary machine kind of sucked, except for the arcade game. But when I played all the time, when I went to arcades or the roller rink, was the 1990s Aliens running gun shooter. Basically played like Contra almost a little bit, but it was basically playing out the story of Aliens. But it's a fun game that you just keep putting quarters in and keep playing for like long periods of time, kind of like the Simpsons game.
Yeah, the old games were nice. I actually know one of the games that's still in arcades, Aliens Termination, which, like I said, it's one of the highlights of the franchise. But to me, the funny thing is, I almost feel like the gaming franchise and the movie franchise like changed positions. Like the film franchise started off good, and then went worse, and then the gaming franchise started off terrible, and then has actually been getting better more recently. And there's even a mobile game, which I'll mention because it's not a highlight for most people, but Aliens Blackout, right? It's like a game where you're kind of like a guy at a terminal and you're kind of guiding people through this facility with an alien on board, and you're trying to keep them safe and kind of go through this narrative. It's interesting that you've seen that sort of dynamic play out, and I think a lot of it has come down to the fact that Sega has really tried to ensure that the franchise was always going in a better direction, whereas on the film side with Ridley Scott, you don't really see that same sort of dedication in terms of telling a better story. I mean, even with the last 3 games that I think came out, not including Blackout, the mobile game, right? We have Alien Isolation, Termination, and Fireteam Elite. I think those are good examples of how the best parts have been more recent with this franchise as opposed to the film franchise, and it's interesting to see that play out.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because when you think about it, right, that just shows you how good of an idea Alien is and Aliens. Why, and when you think about like why is this such a great idea? It's kind of because they did the reverse of Superman, right? They gave you a creature that is like almost like the most impossible thing there, right? It has has like a perfect kill ratio. If you harm it, it shoots out acid blood. It's like every possible thing you can think of. Oh, this thing can do it, right? And it was such a captivating idea because the designs of the design of it was very reminiscent of what H.R. Geiger stuff, or H.R. Geiger. It is just creepy looking to begin with. So they brought that into the real world with the movie, and then pitting just one person up against this killing machine, and like how are you going to defeat it? Well, there's no way to defeat it, and there's no way to run away because you're in space. Made it for a very compelling movie, and then Aliens did a great job with expanding more on how that alien organism works, other than just, hey, there's an egg, a face hugger, and then a monster, right? They showed you that there's a queen and kind of how they build a nest and whatnot. But they didn't focus just on that, right? It was just, yeah, here's this thing, and then you walk through it. They weren't going to have somebody sit there and explain to you that, hey, look, they're making a nest out of all this, and hey, look, there must be a queen that does this, and these must be worker ants, and this and that. They just put it there, assume that you would figure it out, that it's kind of like ants but super powered. And they had a movie around that. That, I think, was just teasing a little bit of what there could be, which is such a great idea that's why games tried to expand on it. But I think the reason why the games were bad at first was because they kept trying to tie into the movies. They kept trying to be, oh, here's the Alien movie in video game form. Here's Aliens in video game form. Here's Alien 3 in video game form. And it's like, no, the movie tie-ins to games was almost never work because it's a story we've already seen and you're already either satisfied with it or not satisfied with it. And if you think the movie was great, the game's always a disappointment. And it's rarely ever that the game is better than the movie, because to do that, they basically have to go off script and not be anything like the movie, kind of like the Wolverine Origins game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I actually think it's good you mentioned that, because it's kind of like Dragon Ball Xenoverse. I think that's probably the best example for what you're trying to get at, where everybody knows Dragon Ball Z who understands that whole storyline. But the fact that you get to insert your character into the franchise, and it's at the same time a new storyline. So it's like they managed to keep the old, give something new, but allow you to also insert yourself into the story, which is why I think it did so well and they released the second game. In this franchise, I think they've done a pretty good job of making it better. I mean, Aliens as a game franchise is really interesting because the early games were kind of like Pac-Man, right? It was like you just running from the aliens in this Atari type of grid and looked like crap. You had all these Game Boy games that weren't, in my opinion, very fun. I wouldn't even recommend playing it. I mean, even out of these 47
I would
games?
recommend most of these 47 games. I would recommend the very last few that came out, and that's it.
I think the arcade ones, there's like 3 arcade ones, four. I say are worth.
I mean, if you can find the arcade
yeah.
machine, I mean, there are those people who are out there that collect this, so I'm sure they're out there. But like, I would have no idea how to find an arcade game to try. Hey, I want to get this arcade to have in my garage or something like that. And I think it starts off with a really good base idea. They did a really good well executing that movie, and then Aliens took it to the next level. Because I mean, Aliens, you see their influence in Halo, and almost every like sci-fi shooter has a reference that goes all the way back to Aliens. Whether it be the design of the Pelican ship, the comments the soldiers make. Anytime anybody says "Game over, man, game over," so it's Aliens reference. And like I said, the games most of them are pretty bad and kind of boring to play. And they jumped over anything. If it was something that could play a video game, there was a game of Alien made for some reason.
Contra.
Yeah, I think, and that's what I think. Like Contra was one of the few games where I feel like that felt more like an Alien game than Aliens, because we got to towards that last level, so I was like, well, that looks like a face hugger, and these look like that. And it's just they traded out an Alien Queen for a giant heart for some reason. But that game felt more like what you're getting from the Aliens movies, just being two badasses killing everything and whatnot. Now I think I would say in my opinion, probably one of the best ones that have come out recently that I've played has been Alien Isolation, which is really good because one, they take a storyline that I don't know if it existed in books or comics or anywhere else, but they basically throughout the movie franchise, you know that Ripley has a daughter that she basically missed seeing that her daughter grow up because she was stuck in space for so long. Alien Isolation is a story of her daughter finding out that there's some news possibly about where her mother is in space. So her daughter goes to the space station that ends up being infested with, it's one alien in it, but later on you find a nest and a bunch of other shit. There's like actual facehuggers in that game, which because it's terrifying to play. But that game was so good because it was actually a true recreation of what the original Alien movie was. Right, you're stuck uh, in a spaceship. You can't leave it, and there's an alien stalking you. And the AI for that alien was incredible with how it stalked you. It never teleported anywhere except for one cutscene, but everything it did, it moved based on your sound. And they did a cheeky little thing that when it came out on Xbox One, the Kinect was still being sold with it, I believe. So whether you had a microphone headset on or if you had the Kinect on, if you didn't check for the option, it picked up your audio. So the game was very much, yeah, you can kind of fight the alien, but you can never really kill it. Like you make your hand on a flamethrower or something like that, it'll just run away. So it's very much like a mix of Outlast, where you have absolutely no weapons and your only way to help save yourself is to hide, and then a little more action where you can actually get flamethrower guns and shoot at the alien and it'll go away. But for the most part, you're going to be limited on ammo. You're not a Marine. You're just a mechanic. So you're hiding in lockers. But how the sound option worked was that when you're hiding, if you were breathing heavily into your microphone or if somebody's making noise in your house, the alien would hear it and double back and go directly for you. So you had to make sure you were quiet while you're hiding so you didn't alert the alien, which I thought that was an amazing detail. And then the fact that outside the Alien Isolation main story, there is a Nostromo story where you literally play as Ripley or any of the old characters, and you're running through basically some of the things they did in the movie. So, like, that is the quintessential game to play with Alien, is Alien Isolation.
Yeah, I actually think, I believe the studio was Creative Assembly. They did a great job on that game because, for all intents and purposes, that was the first game that felt like the Alien franchise. It had the sound effects. It had the CRT screen sort of deal that was prevalent throughout the game. It felt like you were literally in that universe, and it helped being in complete POV. So the whole time you're in first person view. So you're actually pretty much living as the character throughout that world. And to kind of quote on what they were saying with Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk's also in that same POV sort of camera the whole time. They were saying there's something about being in that first person view that makes you feel like you are that character. Whereas a lot of the other games are either third person or first person, and some let you switch between them. Having the game force you into first person and then you're in a horror scenario makes you have to look around more. Whereas in third person, you have a wider angle view. But to tie that all in, you have the synths, right? The synths are on this station. They're also a danger to you. You have humans who are both helpful and harmful to you. You have the aliens who are the alien who's also harmful to you. So you do have a lot of threats to assess in that game. It's a great. It's hard to explain really, but it's in most games, like let's say you're playing like Friday the 13th. You're being haunted essentially by Jason Voorhees. But imagine being hunted down by a lethal killer that can hear you where you are at any point in time and doesn't need to rest. There's something about that feels threatening.
It's like you said, Friday the 13th. Right? That's actually a fairly good game, probably a very good representation of what the movies were trying to get across. But the thing is, I don't see Friday the 13th as a scary game or Dead by Daylight as a scary game. Those are games where it has a horror aesthetic, but it's basically a game of tag. You're one person's it, and you're running away from them, trying to get away the whole time. But it's nothing like a lot of jump scares or scripted moments or horror happening. Where in Alien, I think because for like the most part in Alien Isolation, the alien's not around at all in the beginning. But when it does start to stalk you, and you do start trying to hide from it, it doesn't cheat with giving you a jump scare somewhere along the way. I think there's, like they said, the developer said, like there's only one segment where they believe the alien has to teleport for a cutscene, but other than that, it's always just tracing you and tracking you through how its AI works. And I find like there's no cheap jump scares like a cheap horror movie does, except for the first achievement in that game that I think you'll get is a jump scare from a synth grabbing your leg underneath the table. Like I remember jumping, and it's like, fuck, that's an achievement. Those assholes. But yeah, going through that and having a realistic AI hunt and stalk you, and not have the cheap scripted jump scares all throughout it, really makes that a horror game versus an action horror game where by the end of it you feel empowered and you're just shooting shit. I mean, I've seen some playthroughs of this, and like towards the end of isolation, you're in a nest and there's face huggers and you have a gun and there's eggs all over the place, but you're still fucking terrified because you don't have a lot of ammo. You got to make sure you don't waste your shots, and you got to make sure you don't get face hugged by one of the ones crawling around. Right? It's still terrifying. You're not to a point where I feel like it's the Resident Evil syndrome, where Resident Evil at the very beginning you're very cautious and you're scared, but by the time you have like a machine gun or a grenade launcher, like fuck it, let's bring it on, and you just blow up everything that comes your way, and you're no longer afraid because now you're empowered, which is a cool feeling as well. But I feel like games like Alien Isolation like nailed the suspense horror that you get from movies like Alien, and like nailed it perfectly. Now that, like I said, it's a perfect game for Alien, but I wouldn't pair Alien Isolation with Aliens, because Aliens is an action combat film basically, and the best game probably going for that right now is actually Aliens Fire Team Elite. Yeah, that I feel like actually caught the film what they're trying to display in all the other action games that they ever made. Because granted, I think more games are kind of based off of Aliens, where they wanted to have space marines and lots of aliens and you're fighting a nest and all that. But the one thing you couldn't get right is basically the swarming effect, which, funny enough, when I look at Fireteam, it's like, all right, cool, they took the Left 4 Dead formula and they just applied it to Aliens.
Yep.
And they actually did it really well, where like the other game clones are clones of Left 4 Dead with aliens. I think one's called Earthfall is just terrible because it's horribly paced. The thing here is that in Fire Team, when you're running around, you get to do those certain sections. It's like, okay, we're gonna get swarmed, and it's a swarm of aliens with one or two or three or four different special powered aliens. Like, it literally is Left 4 Dead. There's the hunter one that jumps on you, the spitter one that spits at you. There's one that explodes gunk everywhere, I think, and then there's like a pretty tanky one, warrior alien, I think, shows up. That's takes lots of damage to kill it. So with all that swarming with you with whatever you're trying to do, it kind of fits into what they're portraying in the film, which was, here's this elite military force, and they're getting overwhelmed and getting whittled down to like 1, 2, 3 of them by the end of it. Alien Fireteam totally captures that. I actually didn't think very highly of the game originally because they had talked about implementing a card system. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, all right, you're trying to like what, be microtransaction, or is this some meta game within the game? Like, just give me the game you want to make, because I think Back for Blood does that,
yeah.
and everybody hates the card system Back for Blood. This one is not so bad. It's just things to either make the game more challenging or give you more bonuses, or make the game easier and not give you a bonus at leveling up all the different characters that you have, which again, all original characters, nobody like from the movie, so you don't have to worry about continuity as where this falls in. But it does give you a cool kind of Left 4 Dead campaign with like basically save points and going through it with a team of, I think, only 3, unfortunately. Yeah. I think it might be better as 4, but maybe 4 people was too much. It made the game too easy. I don't know.
Well,
but Fireteam I felt worked really well.
There was a bug on, I believe it was limited to the PS4, where people could get up to 5 people in a match, and they were saying they were running at the hardest difficulty, and it was still easy for them because those extra 2 hands just makes it much easier to kind of destroy the aliens. But Aliens Fireteam is such a great result because, for one, it didn't release at full price. It was $40. It actually released and then soon after went on Game Pass, which is how I caught with it, because I was like, well, I'm not interested in paying.
I think it was a day one release on Game Pass, actually.
I don't think so, because I believe it was, because I didn't see it there on Game Pass on release. It was added soon after, and I heard people talking about it, but because Robert, a buddy of ours, he was talking about it. He actually bought it, and then when he was talking about it, I was like, oh, it's finally coming to Game Pass. I was kind of on the fence like you about it. I mean, to be fair, when you look at the gameplay footage of Alien Fireteam, it doesn't look that good, right? It's not a graphical powerhouse. It's not going to woo you with whatever it has. I mean, the facial animation, there is none, right? If someone's talking,
Yeah, that does suck.
yeah, the mouth does not move. Um, but once you get past some of those limitations, and even some of the rough dialogue, like the lady speaking Spanish, kind of gets on me sometimes because it's not. For all intents and purposes, Vasquez kind of was more of like a Mexican Spanish, right? In this one, it's like a forced Spanish that doesn't really fit exactly as the way Vasquez kind of laid it out, and her character would have laid it out. But even that aside, even the lack of facial animation aside, they did a great job with the game design. The game design is really good. They've had a plan out for it. There's an actual storyline there with a lot of, I wouldn't say side quests necessarily, because you're just going off, picking up this stuff, going back to the station and talking to people, getting a little more fill in on the story. Um, and I think it's really good in terms of a world building standpoint. I think you hit the nail on the head of how this is Left 4 Dead, but better in some ways in that continuation of that type of game style. Because Back 4 Blood, I don't want to get into that, but that one was disappointing. I think what actually makes Aliens Fireteam Elite so good is that, whereas Back 4 Blood is like, here's like, I don't know, 70 guns, right? And throwing all this at you, you can literally just pick up this game, choose a character. It automatically limits you to the guns you start out with, and then you can unlock more. So it's a lot more approachable from a gameplay standpoint. You can get into it a lot more easily. I mean, my wife, she plays it. I tend to backpack her because she's not much of a shooter person. But the fact that you
Backpack.
yeah, but the fact that she can play it, I think says a lot, because this is not the type of game she would play. But she likes the Aliens, the first two Aliens movies. This game is very tolerable for her. And there's difficulties, obviously casual and standard. There's no friendly fire, but then you go above that, and then you're going to start taking friendly fire damage. And if the guy has a pumped up gun, you're going to take a lot of damage if he shoots you in the back of the head or something like that.
Yeah, it definitely suffers from the Left 4 Dead of people walking in front of you constantly while you're firing at shit. Because it also doesn't have a crouch button. You have to crouch behind something. So there are definitely, like you said, some technical limitations, but it feels like the way the game looks, it doesn't look like it's a game from like 10 years old. Like, Clone Marines looked terrible. Like that was an Xbox One title, and that looked like a 360 game. It had very poor AI. Nothing in that game was redeemable. Even their Easter eggs was stupid with a giant donut rolling down a hill. Like, it's just not great. The thing I think with a lot of alien games is they try to make them all look really old and aesthetic because it's from the 70s. So they try to recreate that old sci-fi, futuristic sci-fi by having like a lot of film grain or stuff like that in there. It's like, no, turn off the film grain. Just give me really properly modeled stuff, and then design the stuff in the game like it would be from that time, how they were doing it in that time era, right? Aliens Fireteam, I think, does really well with, like you said, gives me the things I recognize from the movies, like the dropship, the hangar, there's loaders and everything, people I can talk to. And just for you, like, hey, you're really going in the story, yeah, go talk to people, listen to what they have to say. For me, it's like, all right, I just want to get to the game, we jump in and play the gameplay. You can do either or, and the game's going to be fun either way. You're not going to miss anything by not paying attention to the story here, and you're not going to lose anything or gain anything from paying super close attention to it and then jumping in. I think it just makes that an all-around fun game for anybody who wants to play. People who are really interested and want to jump into the lore, and people who like, hey, I just want to shoot aliens. All right, cool, jump in, let's shoot some aliens.
Yeah, and I think the best feature in terms of its game design, not even getting into the guns, because the guns are this well-balanced area, and there's a team dynamic of how you can balance each other as a team. Like, one player could be the doctor, one player can be the demolisher, which is where, like Vasquez with the full automatic turret, basically, right? But then you have the level progression, right? Like, there's essentially four, I forgot what it calls them, but there's four types of chapters, and then in these four chapters there's three missions. And the thing that's nice is each chapter is very unique. One kind of starts with the space station dynamic, go find Honecker. The next one is you kind of finding out more about what kind of led to things. And then when you go from environment to environment, you have that Prometheus map where everything kind of just opens up all of a sudden. Whereas the first map is claustrophobic, then everything kind of opens up. And then when you beat the game, you can get, from kind of going back to Prometheus, right? One of the cool things was the guy who has the geographical thing that just scans the environment and tells you everything around it. Well, when you beat the game, you unlock the recon class. You use his special and that or her special. You could be male or female, right? With each character. When you use the recon item, it'll scan the environment and tell you where every enemy is, even the eggs. And that's pretty cool. The fact that you can actually take some of the worst parts of the franchise and actually make them cooler than what they were in the films really shows how the game has done some things with the best parts of the worst parts. and you
And I say that's the thing. The progression part about this game is a nice feature to have it that keeps you coming back to play, right? Because, like Left 4 Dead, there's no progression with characters. They're just all the same, and they can use all the same weapons whether they pick it up or not. Here's a game where, cool, there's not a battle pass where you got to try and level up throughout within a time frame. Because the problem with that is if you finish out the battle pass, you're not interested in playing it anymore until the next battle pass comes out because there's no progression. Here, having progressions to unlock guns for specific classes, unlock certain weapons, beat the game, and unlock a new class that you can start all over with, total brings me more replay value. So definitely makes it a very fun game to play. Just I hope moving forward with Alien games, that they keep making more Alien games since they haven't made an Alien. Well, I guess they made Covenant. That's the most recent Alien movie, right?
Yeah, that one was pretty rough though.
And that was really bad. I don't know if they're not continuing the story, right?
I don't know. I know Ridley Scott had plans to do 4 more movies after Prometheus. I think that was the discussion, but I mean, I don't want to go too into the movies because it kind of is such a mess. But I always wish that Neil Blomkamp, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I wish he had the shot to make the film he had, where you actually would see Hicks come back, right, with Sigourney Weaver and all that jazz. I thought that would have been a great return to the story. But I mean, I get it. You know, Ridley Scott kind of took it his direction, and I think the one thing that the games have done well, in specifically Fireteam Elite, where the films have failed, is the films have kind of explored the origin of the aliens, and that's where things get really dumb. Whereas in the games, they kind of show you glimpses of it without giving away too much of the special sauce, so you still think it's actually cool. I think that's a good example of the games. And in Alien Isolation, you know, it's like going into Ripley's daughter. It doesn't it doesn't feel forced in why she's there, whereas a lot of game decisions they kind of force you. Like Aliens Colonial Marines is a good example of how things feel forced. There's things just kind of done. Like the focus, honestly, with Aliens Colonial Marines was so much on Easter eggs that the story didn't really work. The game had design issues. It didn't look good. You know, I bought the $100, collector's edition and immediately regretted all of it.
Yeah, Gearbox basically just outsourced that to like 5 different studios and try and get that shit done.
Yeah, I think they did 10% of the actual work themselves, even though they got all that money. I mean, I know we're just talking about Alien Isolation and Fireteam Elite. Those are 2 really good games. You know, one is a first person like hide and seek, right? Because you're trying to not get caught. It's immediate death, right? And then Fireteam Elite, which is pretty much like Aliens, where it's like you're empowered, but like how empowered are you? And I think one of the pinnacle moments for me playing Fireteam Elite was it was me, a buddy, and this guy who sucked with us. It was a random we kind of just had in this match. And we dropped like every turret we had because we're running on intense with not very high level characters. And when you run at the end of these chapters, it's basically like going to be, hey, if you hit this button, there's going to be a horde that comes at you, right? So it's like these campaigns with a bit of horde mode in them, and you just have to survive the horde. We drop every turret we had. Like I think we must have dropped at least 7 turrets in total between us 2. And you're literally like hit the button and boom, aliens are coming down. All 7 of these guns are just going off. It's absolute mayhem, and we're still barely holding them at bay because this guy who's with us wasn't high level enough to really handle the swarm. And when we actually survived it, even though like 2 of us went down, the other one picked us both up, like, in the midst of all this. It's very rare that you see a game that well balanced, that you're literally getting your ass kicked and then you can still recover, and you can see all this gunfire kind of come around. You can use the turrets as not so much as to stop the enemy, but also as to detect the enemy for you when they're behind you, because things will jump behind you. And it's full of a lot of good Easter eggs of event drop opening, but there's no alien. But sometimes an event will drop, and there are a swarm of aliens coming out of it. Really good dynamics. They do have a plan to launch some updates for it, which I really hope one of them is more of another chapter, because without spoiling anything, in case someone does want to play the Aliens Fireteam Elite, there is a beginning and an end to the campaign, and you're basically just kind of replaying that whole thing. Um, it is interesting to see how many ideas they've kind of created from this, and there's a lot more in the franchise that they can kind of poke into without destroying anything. Um, so I think they've done a great job with Fireteam Elite. I mean, I could go on and on about Fireteam Elite, but I just feel like its game design is good. The gun game is designed really well balanced. Good sound design, actually great sound design. And I think you said it best when we were playing. Like, this is a great game to play with friends.
Yeah, it definitely is. And as you said, like the funny thing is, like this is a pretty small studio. They're not like super huge. I don't think, right? The studio that made Fireteam.
I failed to recall their name. I think it was like Heavy Iron Studios.
But basically, they've built the model for what a games as a service should be. Is, hey, here's a multiplayer game that has a story, has campaigns, has a progression to level up through, and what do you do for a service? You add more chapters, you add more levels to it, and then boom, you have a game that will keep growing as you add more classes for soldiers and this and that, instead of, hey, how about a loot box and some random number generator bullshit they throw in all these games as a service, which honestly gets it wrong. Nobody likes playing that stuff. Well, they're looking just to hook the gambling addicts and whales who throw money away. When you really want to make like something fun, Alien Fireteam is a good blueprint for, let's design a fun game now, and then let's build in a progression system that is not completed super quickly, and it doesn't get boring and doesn't require people to keep buying stuff. This works for what I think everyone else should be thinking of this as how you need to keep a game alive for a long period of time. And hopefully it does. I mean, it coming out in Game Pass and it coming out not at a full price means there was not like a ton of faith in this being a blockbuster, but that's like any Alien game that comes out. You're going to have a hard time trying to sell it unless it's doing something very different like Isolation did. Isolation, I think, was able to come out as a full price AAA game. Basically because everything before it is an action game, and they sold it definitely as, no, this is a horror survival game, and it definitely lives up to that versus just being a run and gun. And Fireteam really feels like Fire Team, like from Halo, where you're dealing with hordes and hordes and hordes of aliens, but instead of just holding one spot constantly, you get to now move through an environment, have a story told to you directly instead of kind of indirectly. Like Left 4 Dead was very indirectly. There's a story there, but you had to read the messages on the walls, read the stuff in the safe room, pick up on the little hints that were laying around. But nobody just literally said, hey, this is what's going on, where you actually get a full campaign, and then they can easily expand on that in the future. So, I mean, these, like I said, there's 47 titles. That's one reason why we're talking about this, is that it's a franchise that's kind of an unknown franchise, but it keeps getting games made somehow. Especially when like the movie franchise is basically falling on its face now. As we say, there's only two good movies, Alien and Aliens. 3 is kind of blah. The Joss Whedon Resurrection was really dumb. Prometheus, we all thought was cool and go return to form, right? And that just got shitty. And then this follow up to that was even shittier. So I don't see another Aliens movie getting made for a long time. But they can keep making games off this stuff forever because they will sell. People will pick it up. But it has a history of like, well, is it going to be hit or miss? People are going to wait to see if it's good. And so far, the last few games that have come out, Isolation, the Termination Arcade, and Fireteam, have been great. I think it's definitely worth a pickup. And if you have time, definitely check it out on Game Pass, basically for free if you can right now. Like you said, it's not a $60 game. It was like $40, I think.
$40. Yeah, if you have Game Pass and you want to buy it for your friend, you get a 20% discount on all games through Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass and you want your buddies to play, you can literally buy it for them as a gift, and instead of paying $40, not on sale, mind you, you're only going to pay $32, which is still a really good deal for the game. If you buy it for yourself when it's going off Game Pass at some point, which I expect will happen, still $32. That's not a bad price to pay for a game you can get a lot of value out of. Um, in kind of going into the arcade games and one of the older games, I know we were split on Aliens versus Predator, which was on the 360 and the PS3. I actually liked that game. I just wish the narrative was told in a more chronological order, because in that game, you play as a human, you play as an alien, you play as a predator, and you basically see the same storyline from each perspective, which I thought that was the best aspect of the game. But some of the design just wasn't there. But in the arcade side, we got pretty lucky, right? Like, one thing that's true, and I think this has helped the Aliens franchise, it's definitely a home gaming sort of title and franchise. It's in the arcades, like in the like first game was 1980 Atari, right? The games that kind of have come out, the best ones we know of until recently, were all arcade games. Aliens, the side scroll shooter that you described as a run and gun, right? 1990. Then we had Aliens versus Predator, which was like a beat 'em up Streets of Rage type of game. Then there was Alien 3, which was like a gun game where you could have two players having guns and you just aimed it on the arcade cabinet at the screen, right? Like a light gun. Um, and then we had Aliens vs. Predator on the 360 and the PS3, Aliens Isolations, and then Aliens Termination, which is another arcade game that came out more recently. I actually enjoy it, but that thing will suck your quarters out because you die so damn much. But it is a lot of fun if you like light gun games, and even more if you like Aliens games. And then Aliens Fireteam Elite, decent games. If you like games where you're kind of just poking around, you could always check out Blackout. I know a lot of people said they enjoyed it. I know a couple people that said they enjoyed it. It's a quick game you can beat in like an hour easy. I think that's why it has people that enjoy it, because it's a nice, quick, fast game. If you fail, okay, you could play it again. It doesn't take that much time. Good franchise in terms of how it's continuing, but I felt like we would be remiss if we didn't mention a game that I wish was made in this franchise, and that's Aliens Crucible. This game was being developed by the famed developer Obsidian. You know Obsidian, right? They did the sequel Fallout New Vegas. They more recently did Outer Worlds. Microsoft now owns them, and they were working on this game, which essentially took place between the events in the Aliens film, right? Between the point where Ripley finds out that LV-426, this is this planet where they went to, they had a derelict spaceship with all these eggs, right? From that like meeting where she has with them and tells them all this, and obviously Burke tells them to go check it out, and then she gets like, hey, do you want to get your license back? Well, how about you go to this planet again and help us figure out what the hell happened? That game was supposed to take place on Hadley's Hope during this whole thing that happened, from the moment they basically get that mission, the communication from Burke to go check it out, to them being infested and all this and that. And it was supposed to be like this nice action RPG. Unfortunately, the game got canceled because Sega was going to press forward with Aliens Colonial Marines, which is a bummer, because the last stand that they kind of show in that film would have been amazing to see in the game. And I think kind of going back to those events, which is, in my eyes, that's peak Aliens franchise, is all the events surrounding Aliens. That's some of the best lore that they could have played with, the best canon they could have played with. I really hope they still consider making that game. I don't know if Microsoft and Obsidian will be able to work with those who have access to the franchise to still make a game like that. But I think there's a lot of merit in something like that, especially with a franchise that more recently has done this well.
I mean, whoever owns the license to Aliens has been making lots of money off having people make crap games and some good games out of it. So, because because you got to remember, even the fact that they didn't make a game, they had to buy the license to start working on the Crucible, start putting shit together, and then they never produced anything. So whoever owns this license is just making money hand over fist, huh?
Yeah, there's footage though on YouTube of the game. It did, you could tell it was still early, but I think it showed the promise. I mean, I really liked Obsidian. I thought I believe they did the sequel for Knights of the Old Republic. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah, I believe they did, and that's actually a really good game. I got to jump back into doing that, playing that one again. Yeah, but I mean, Aliens franchise, you know, it's one of those ones where it's like surprising it has so many titles, so many tie-ins, and I mean, the Alien is kind of just a part of our own pop culture because it's even in other games like Mortal Kombat. It's a fighter
Yeah.
that you can fight with. Um, those types of tie-ins just kind of screams to how important this franchise, this movie franchise, is to us in storytelling and good examples of horror. And the newest games that have come out have been really good. So if you have a chance, Game Pass, or go out there and find these games and play them. I would highly recommend Alien Isolations, the Termination Arcade, or Fireteam Elite. The 360 Predator, Alien vs Predator ones would be a decent one, as you said. You like the light gun Alien 3 game. And there's the old arcade, but like the arcade games, they're designed to take money from you.
Yeah.
So be aware of that. But the console games were fun, so definitely try those out. What we want to do next is we want to hear what you guys think. Let us know if you have any thoughts on the Alien games. Which one was your favorite? What are your favorite parts from any of the games that we've mentioned, or did we miss any games that you think are really important to the Alien franchise? But other than that, any other closing thoughts?
One thing I'd mention about Fireteam Elite is I actually think the community for the most part has been pretty good too, which is pretty rare. I think that's why I like it so much. Is it really does remind me of the good side of Left 4 Dead's community, where, I mean, I jumped in a game. In the game, you know, you have to be a combat level, right? And like someone's combat rating on this $500 combat rating mission, his was like, I kid you not, it was like 200. And I was like, you know what? I'll take it. Like I'll take it through. And like he did his best to like hang back and cover me, and he healed me, used his health pack on me because I'm sitting here taking the brunt of the damage. I really like the fact that the fans that are playing that are playing Aliens Fireteam are really enjoying themselves, and it is so much fun. I don't recommend checking footage of it. Just try it out if you have Game Pass. That'll give you a good idea of whether or not this is something you'll play.
Yeah, and definitely grab some friends and play, or jump into a party and play with some folks. Fun game, great community. That's our show this week, so thank you for listening. You can find us at forthrightgaming.com, also on Facebook and on Twitch at Forthright Gaming. We stream Monday, Wednesday, and Friday every week. Right now we're going through the Assassin's Creed franchise. We are on game number 5 of 12 and working our way through all of them. So come join us and let us know what you think. All right, have a great day.
Have a good one.